Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Rasick. What is up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. We are going to have what I think should be a fun and enlightening episode, and for lack of a better title, we're going to call it Clear the Shelf Law School with two highly unqualified professors, myself, Chris Grant, and my friend Chris Rasick. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of business laws and principles and how they can help you and maybe even how they can hurt you. And some of them are going to include things like Pareto's Principle, which happens to be one of my favorites. And I've got a great book recommendation for you guys. And at the end, I think we're going to be talking about the Sunk Cost Fallacy, which is probably something that we'll have to do a follow-up episode all on its own on. Just because there's so much meat there to get to and ways that it can hurt your business kind of long term and while you're growing. So let's go ahead and get diving in. Chris, how was your week, man? How was it since last time we chatted?
My week's good. I'm excited about this episode. It's probably a whole lot of laws stuff that you didn't know that you knew. You may not know the title of the law, but the actual phenomenon, the explanation of the law itself, you probably more people are going to recognize those than they realize. So this should be a good absolutely. One. But my week's been good. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Getting ready to send my documentation in to get ungated in DVDs.
It's fantastic.
I'm excited about it. It's something that I completely ignored because I was under the impression I knew of one source to get ungated, but it was going to cost about $1,000. I think was their minimum order threshold. So it's just something I put on the back burner, and just largely ignored. But using your method that you shared, it was a nugget in your Discord group. I think I'm into it about $15 or so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very small fraction of what I thought it would take to get ungated. So I appreciate that. It's one of many nuggets that are dropped in that Discord group. So anybody listening, if you have a chance to join, it's well worth it. It's for the cost of a cheap dinner with no alcohol or appetizers. You'll get your money's worth multiple times. So, but so since last episode, my week's been really good because I got to reconnect with my best friend. He moved to North Carolina about 15 years ago. And so it was my buddy in North Carolina, along with another friend of ours. And the three of us made up the bachelor pad. We rented a house and before any of us were in serious relationships. And you can imagine the hijinks and shenanigans that we got into and told war stories of through this last week. But anyway, my buddy decided to come up kind of unexpected, a spur of the moment thing, because he got a new job at a large computer company down there. And he had been with a major hospital since he moved down there. So he had about 15 years in at this hospital. And he had tried over and over again to get into the IT department at the hospital to no avail. He even went to school, got a certification on networking and did all this stuff. And they never gave him a job. So he was frustrated and didn't really care for his boss too much, from what I hear. So he finally got the IT position that he's always wanted, just for another employer. So and he had a vacation planned this summer that he had to clear with his new job already. So, and then not knowing what the paid time off policy at the new job was, he decided he better come up before he starts this new job. So, so that was why he with short notice came up here. So anyway, how this connects to Amazon is the third member of the trio from the Bachelor Pad. He's worked in IT for at least 10 years, and he's super smart. He's great at it. Not that he helps me with my websites, but yeah, but he's good at it. So the one night, the three of us are sitting around, and they talk shop a little bit, but then the conversation turned to how my buddy from North Carolina was looking forward to a Monday through Friday 8-hour a day schedule, and most importantly to him, how they'll have weekends off. So I kind of got a shit-eating grin on my face as the two of them are talking, and they're going back and forth. Well, the weekends will go by fast, and it'll be Monday before you know it. And he goes, but that's much better than working 10 or 12 hours on a Saturday. And so they're kind of cutting it up back and forth. And they finally looked over at me and said, well, what's so funny, Rasek? And I said, you know what? I said, since I quit my day job, my 9 to 5, I said, every day is Saturday for me. I said, it's been about 500 in a row and counting. So, but and you and I have talked about that, hashtag forever Saturday. And of course I made that joke to my former coworkers at the bank when I quit, just to kind of rub it in their face. A little bit good-natured, maybe.
Good-natured ribbing.
Yes. Yeah. But you know what? It's really more of a positive reinforcement for me. It's my main motivation, and forever Saturday, that term is basically why I did what I did. And at the time, it was important for me to take back more of my time, or take back all of it, really is more like it. So, it kind of reinforced, and reminded me of why I did what I did when I went full time with Amazon, and why I left the corporate world, and why I left a 9 to 5. It was good to get that perspective back. Sometimes it can be a gift to be pulled back from moving in a potentially negative direction, of possibly becoming complacent, or, you're starting to take a good thing for granted. It can be a gift when you get pulled back, or at least stopped in your tracks if you're moving in that direction. I kind of think of it like the honeymoon may be over with me and my Amazon selling career, but certainly doesn't mean I'm not still happily married. I love this job. I love being able to, we were joking last episode about, waking up at 10 a.m. and going to bed stupidly late and whatnot. But, it's important to not take for granted how much of your time you have, and the beauty of being able to make your own schedule, and, do what you want to do when you do it. I'm not trying to make the impression that it doesn't take effort, it doesn't take work to do this, but it's so great to, kind of operate on your own terms. Do you agree?
I do. I'm now that I've moved from Ohio, which, funny thing, when I lived in Ohio, family, friends, from across the country, they were never like, hey, Chris, can we come visit you in Ohio? Not a once. But now that I've moved to the sunny state of Florida, once a quarter, some family member, some friend, one of my wife's friends, hey, I was wondering, could we come stay in that extra room that you guys have? Because we have the house that we live in had like a mother-in-law bedroom built onto the house after it was built. And so it's got a bathroom and an exit out to the pool and things. And we recently just had someone come down, and she was commenting. She was like, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and, you're here sitting and we're having a conversation, and you're not, looking at your watch or anything like that. She's like, what's going on? I was like, I'll work at 9 o'clock tonight, or I'll work at, maybe I'll get up a little extra early tomorrow and I'll put the time back in. And I don't know, it is a privilege to be able to put in the effort when we feel like putting in the effort, and not, her and her husband, they own some retail shops back up in Ohio, and they're chained to their store hours. Unfortunately, our store hours are 24/7, 365, because Amazon just handles it for us. It is nice to be reminded that even though our honeymoons may be over with Amazon, it is nice to kind of have that little anniversary check-in every now and again and just remember, this special relationship that's been kindled thanks to Jeff Bezos and Amazon.
Yeah, it's you can kind of remind yourself that if you have kids, you don't ever have to miss a little league game, and or any school function or any of that stuff. There are a whole lot of perks that come along with this.
Absolutely. Now, I think that those stories take us into our first law really, really well, Parkinson's law. And if you're not familiar with Parkinson's law, it is the law that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. And if you're still a desk jockey or a cubicle dweller, and again, that's said with love. It's not said with animosity or anything like that. But you know how that goes. If the boss gives you 8 weeks to get a project done, you know that it's going to take 8 weeks, and then you're going to be like, oh, hey boss, I need 2 or 3 more days just to put the cherry on top of this sundae. And that's fine, but when you're self-employed, when you work for yourself, or even more when you have people relying on you, you've got preppers who work for you, and you've got some other people, and we've got some people who do some things for us. Now we have not only ourselves to fend for, but we're also fending for these other folks. If we allow work to fill all the time that's available, well, something bad's going to happen eventually. And I'm kind of curious, we could talk about what everyone else and maybe people like, Stephen Covey and, time management folks talk about, but I guess what are some things that have actually worked for you to kind of combat Parkinson's law?
I think the best thing you can do to combat Parkinson's law is simply shorten your deadlines. If you're giving yourself 4 hours to source $1,000 in inventory, make it 2 hours or make it 1 hour. It puts self-imposed deadlines, kind of move them up, and I mean, you'll certainly be surprised at how much production you can actually get done, and it's not like there's a boss breathing down your throat if you don't get it done. If you only get 750 done in 1 hour, that's still way better than $1,000 in 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it's, whether you're, if you're a writer and you want to put that deadline on yourself, hey, I want to write, 2,000 words in, again, 4 hours, bump that to 2 hours. You'll be surprised at how efficient you become simply to meet a deadline. I think that's probably the far and away the number one method on combating Parkinson's law.
Yeah, I like that. I think one of the questions that could come out of this is, okay, well, what's the best time management technique to use? Do I use Pomodoro? Do I use, heck, I don't even, there's so many out there. What else could I use? And I think the only right answer to that is you have to use the one that you actually use on a regular basis. Because this hit or miss with, managing your time kind of leaves everything messy and not completed. So whether it's the Pomodoro technique or if you're a Post-it note person, so I'll tell you what I do, and it's not the best, but it gets the work done. But on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of computer paper, every single night before I wrap things up, I just write out my to-do list for the next day. And my to-do list is stuff that I really want to get done in the first half of the day. That way I can leave the second half of the day open for tasks that are not so taxing on the mind. So like for me, sourcing is kind of zen. You can sit there and I can kind of veg out in front of the computer, for lack of a better word, and I can source. But if I want to write a blog post or cut a video or anything like that, I try to move that up to the first half. There are some people who break things down in 15-minute increments in their calendar, which I'm not that type A, so I just can't do it. But if that's what works for you, implement it on a daily basis, and then, get it done. I mean, that's kind of the only way to get around that.
Yeah, I think it's important. I've been reading a lot about, kind of catering to your personal preferences. Just be honest with yourself and how you work. And if you're not sure what method will work for you, test it out and be honest with the results. And pick the one that leaves you the most productive. I don't have it fully fleshed out, but a new book I'm reading is talking about flow. And it's a concept which I kind of gravitate towards. This is when I kind of get into a zone, I just work as long as I possibly can, while it's clicking. Unfortunately it happens to be 2:30 in the morning too often, but so be it. But I just kind of, when I get into the space I need to be the most productive, I shut everything off and just let it run its course. And that seems to work well for me, unless I have some epiphany, down the road and completely change or realize, that I'm not very efficient. But I know that's my tendency is, it's kind of spurts, and that kind of lends itself well to how I unstructure my day. It's not really structuring it, but I have big gaps where I can go play golf if I want to, or I can go, to take my daughter to gymnastic class. And like you said before, I'll just work later. There's plenty of time, plenty of windows available to me. So I find that method works well. So
yeah, I like that method. You sprint a little bit and then you jog for a little while. I think that's okay. And I like to leave a little bit of time for maybe a midday nap every now and again. Not every day, but every now and again. And something you said was interesting. You said that you often get on kind of that hot streak late at night. It's been a long time since I read the article, but there is an article that is backed by a couple of scientific studies that tell you there's a reason for people who are maybe a little bit more creative have a streak later at night typically. And so that actually doesn't surprise me with you.
If you find it, send that to me. I'd love to read it. Everything is about getting up early, and like all the CEOs get up at 4:00 in the morning, and to us night owls, that's kind of discouraging. I need somebody great to stay up till 4 in the morning, so I can idolize them.
Elon Musk, he actually just talked about it. So
there you go.
Yeah, there you go. He was talking. I recently watched him chat with some people, and he was praising the work ethic of another country. And he talked about how, here in the U.S., people don't like burning the midnight oil. But I want to say it was China he was talking about. But he's like, the people in China, he's like, they won't just be burning the midnight oil. They'll be burning the 3 a.m. oil. And he's like, and that's when a lot of the times I get my best work done is late at night. He'll go for 18 hours a day sometimes, and that'll be right up until 2-3 in the morning, and then I'll sleep on the factory floor, even though he's the richest guy in the world. So he's a bird of a different feather.
That's true. Now if we could just kind of modify that with is it France that takes like the 3-hour lunch and they drink wine and eat cheese and then take a nap? But if we kind of meld the two together, I'm in.
Right. Now, Parkinson's law, I think, goes together really well with the next one we talked about before the show, which is the Hawthorne Effect. And the Hawthorne Effect is interesting, and I think there are some ways to use this to your advantage, to kind of use it as a lever to make sure that Parkinson's law does not overcome your life or your business. So, and what the Hawthorne Effect is it's a phenomenon in which participants alter their behavior as as a result of being observed. And Chris found a kind of a cool study here. So a study of hand washing among medical staff found that when the staff knew they were being watched, compliance with hand washing was 55% greater than when they were not being watched. And so, you're on your best behavior essentially when your corporate overlords are checking in on you, and you know that. So I was thinking about how can you use this personally? And then I've got some questions for you too. So we talked in one of the previous episodes about how I've noticed that people are doing study sessions or they're doing work sessions while they're live on TikTok or Instagram or something like that. And people are watching them. Okay. And it seemed, I don't know. I wanted to make fun of these people at first. I really did. Like, how narcissistic that you think people want to watch you study, at medical school, or people want to watch you, write your screenplay at Starbucks. But then I really started thinking about it. And I was like, you know what? That's really kind of a great idea. You don't have to pay anybody to check in on you. But you can be accountable to people who can, they can make fun of you. They can, do whatever in this live stream, and you have to be there working. Otherwise, they call you out. You take a moment to read the comments, and, people can say, hey, you're supposed to be working, like get back to work. And then there are also those services. There are services that you can pay to be a part of where you work in a community via a Zoom call or something like that, and you have 20 minutes on and 3 minutes off, and you work in these little spurts. And so I think that you could actually hack the Hawthorne effect to your advantage if you're not somebody who is naturally motivated, or, you do allow work to fill up all the time that's available. And so I'm curious, Chris, have you done anything? And I guess, what are your thoughts on the Hawthorne effect?
Well, first, I have a couple of points about the hand washing study about medical staff. My first point is, ew. How is that? And number two, how is that number not 100%? Like, why? That's one of those things that you learn that you can't unlearn. And I just assumed medical staff I assumed that number was 100%. I'm not happy finding out it's less than 100.
And unfortunately, now if there's ever like a MRSA outbreak at a hospital, you go back to this study and you're like, oh, well, now, it makes total sense. This probably should be more common.
Yeah. That ranks up there with, the study I read about the remote control in hotel rooms. Forever altered my my behavior, and then why you close the lid to the toilet when you flush it. That very disturbing evidence. But the Hawthorne effect. This can be either way. It could be a positive and it can be a negative as it relates to the solopreneur. Maybe I think a lot of solopreneurs, you become a solopreneur because you have that drive, and a lot of them are self-motivated. So maybe this doesn't apply to everybody, but it's curious. This is actually a study that I'd like to read, because to find out what people do. I'd love to see the comparison between the groups, the one that knew they were being observed and the one that was told they weren't being observed. Because I know that myself. Where I'm sitting here, I've actually recently turned it, and so now my wife, if she walks by, she can see my computer monitors.
Very smart.
Yeah, so it's I kind of did it just to save space, because like an L-shaped desk, kind of move it, kind of free up some room through the middle of the room is mainly why I did it. But it does have a bit of a Hawthorne effect, because my screen is is visible to her now. But and then I mentioned we touched on this last episode too, but the story that Neville Medora told about his co-working sessions, when he would invite people over with their laptops, and basically they'd all just work at the same table, but he would make sure that somebody sat on the same side of the table as him, because he knows if he's not checked, he's going to scroll Facebook or he's going to jump on Reddit, and he's going to be distracted. So he finds that he's far more productive if he knows that somebody can see his screen. Just knowing that your boss is there. Think it back to my, the corporate job. I actually got good enough to where I could notice the type of footsteps that were coming towards me down the aisle, and so that determined which tab on my computer I clicked on real quick, but we know this deep down, the Hawthorne Effect, you're on your best behavior. Especially if you think someone of authority is watching you. This is basically about employee engagement, and enhancing performance and productivity. So by becoming a solopreneur, you kind of lose that effect, because there is no boss. There's no one, no one to put you on your best behavior. You have to manage your own time. And if you find yourself struggling with that, and I'll be honest, I did it too. It's like I mentioned, when I quit my day job and I went full time with Amazon, I was all about taking my time back, and I took full advantage of it, and kind of enjoyed it. And steadily I'm realizing and kind of filling up more of my day with more productivity. And of course, and I'm honest with myself, I know I could be far more efficient than I am now. So it's not like I have to give up time, to put more work in. I kind of tweak the short burst that I work in a little better and get more done that way. But you have to be disciplined, and that's something I struggle with, and I'm sure other people can struggle with from time to time. But the main things to combat that is time management, and again, kind of combo this with Parkinson's, the law, not the syndrome, and make shorter deadlines. Just kind of give yourself a shorter window, and get that burst of productivity. And then as it relates to the Hawthorne Effect, be honest about your productivity, be honest about your output, and kind of go from there, and use time management and an honest measurement to determine how you can be more efficient, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. We may have to do an episode on OKRs, which is kind of something Google came up with, sort of like KPIs, but just a little twist on them. But I think probably more effective. But we'll do that in another episode. And one of the other things is you could use the Hawthorne Effect to your advantage as your business gets larger, and maybe you have virtual assistants, maybe you have prep help, and so this next thing that I say is probably going to sound a little creepy, and I don't mean it to. All right, but with a virtual assistant, they might be on the other side of the world doing work for you, and so of course, if we were not a connected society, it would be impossible to be able to check in on them. But that's not the case anymore. You can use the Hawthorne Effect to your advantage with things like Hubstaff. That's going to take screenshots of their screen and tell you how productive that they've been. Maybe you've got staff locally, and like your prep help. Maybe you throw up a camera wherever they're working so that they know, okay, well, someone can check in on me at any time, or heck, you could just walk through the prep area and they'll know. But some of the folks who I've seen with much larger warehouses, they put up several cameras, and yes, it's about security, but the other thing is well, they could also be watching over their employees at any time, and it gives a little bit of that, hey, there's an eye in the sky watching over me. I better not count the cards while I'm on the clock.
Sure.
And, it might sound a little creepy, but as long as you talk about it and say, here's why it's being done, etc., it would probably just be a good thing between you and your employees and productivity, because everyone's got to hit certain numbers or for things to make sense. So
yeah, and not to mention, employees want to achieve their goals too. They want to be a good employee. So simple. Aside from monitoring with cameras and hub staff, just give regular feedback. And communicate with them. They most employees want to know they're doing a good job, or at least know that you recognize that they're being productive and doing a decent job. So communication's key, and just letting them know, going over spreadsheets like I do with my VAs. I'll kind of take some time at the beginning of their day, and we'll just say, hey, let's go over a couple of these, and I'll tell them things that I pointed out. If I kick something out because I didn't like it, I'll let them know why. Or if there's a certain store that I don't want them to source from, I'll let them know why, or let them know what that store is, or just something with too many variations. Say, hey, this is, go on to Keepa, go to the variations tab, and then sort by rating and feedback, and you can kind of tell, you can get a good idea of what's selling and what's not out of the variations. So and that's going to lead to more positive results from the employees, and it's certainly not going to hurt job satisfaction as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I know this is going to be for another episode as well, but hiring and managing virtual assistants, I think, is something that we should probably discuss at some point, because I've got some big feelings on hiring and managing virtual assistants that I think probably a lot of Amazon sellers either need to hear, especially if they've never hired or managed anybody before. But let's go to the next one. And this next one is something that I think everybody absolutely has it at some point. But B, it's also something that people who've been down the path for a while, I think, continue to have. I know that it's something that I still struggle with today, a decade after becoming an Amazon seller, and that's imposter syndrome. And even if you've never heard of imposter syndrome, I know you know what it is. That feeling of being inadequate. Even if you've been successful, chronic self-doubt, and I don't know. I think that chronic self-doubt can come from two things. Number one, it can just be something that you self-impose. But the other thing is that the very nature of going into business for yourself as a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, the 10-year, I guess the 10-year view of a business is probably going to be somewhat like this. But the day-to-day view of a business is a roller coaster. It is up and down, and one day you're the smartest person in the world, and the next day you're an absolute moron. And so that probably doesn't help either. So I don't know. This one is kind of a tough one. Like, I make videos, on the internet all the time. I sell on Amazon. I do some other things. We've got a track record of success with what I do in my business, but there will be times, quite often, where I'm like, you know what? One of these days, everyone is going to find out that I am full of it. And so I guess, how have you maybe overcome that, or at least managed it?
Have I? I'm not sure I have yet. I was good. My thought was, a good example of imposter syndrome is me sitting here as a podcast host. This is on YouTube, and probably the second least likely thing that I wanted to do. Maybe posting video of me breakdancing on Reddit might be the one thing that I would not want to do before putting my video of myself on YouTube. Terrifying to me. But this is a tough one. This is and it can come in multiple waves. Especially as you start getting more more income sources. If you're trying to branch out and you're doing multiple things, like we're doing the podcast here. I'm struggling with imposter syndrome. Amazon seller definitely struggled with imposter syndrome. The tough thing is that there's no protocols. There's no measuring stick, because you're kind of figuring this out on your own. It gets into being in unfamiliar territory, like we talked on the previous episode, about being okay with being uncomfortable, because it's unfamiliar and you're out of your comfort zone. That's when it's easy for the self-doubt to kind of creep in. But if you think about it, really we have to accept the process of gaining experience. Imposter syndrome, it's kind of rooted in perfectionism. It's nothing we do can we wait until we're an absolute expert. We have to accept the fact that we're going to gain experience as we go. We can't do it from a position of omnipotence, on a certain project or a certain thing that we're trying to do, like whether it be selling on Amazon or selling on eBay or going on YouTube or writing a blog, putting yourself out there. That's another big one. I remember the one good story from one of many good stories from the motivation myth that we've talked about before. He told the story of the guy was an editor. I think it was for the New Yorker, but if it wasn't the New Yorker, it was a major magazine. And he said this editor that he knew was probably the greatest writer that he knew personally, or that he had read. He was a fantastic writer. So, but the guy was an editor of a magazine, right? So he had to sit there every single day and read over, edit, and then eventually okay and publish inferior work. It was work that this editor could have written much better himself, but he had to approve it and let it fly, let it go into print, because that was his job, and the writers that were writing it, that was their job. That was really interesting to he basically had to accept the fact that it wasn't perfect over and over again, day in, day out, every single article, every single day. And I thought that was pretty powerful for people struggling with imposter syndrome and worried about everything being perfect and all the, everything around them being just right before they start something or before they do something. I thought it was really good. That stuck with me.
Yeah, I think that is it is a good story and an excellent book if you haven't read it yet. The motivation myth is really, really good. Yeah. I heard an interesting quote, and I'm never going to remember who said it, but it was something to the point that the only person who never feels like an imposter is an actual imposter. So if it's, if you're just starting on Amazon, or maybe you're, been in it for a little while, or starting any business really, and you just happen to come across this podcast, I guess get used to it, that feeling of being an imposter, of not knowing what you're doing. But the cool thing about being an entrepreneur or an Amazon seller is, if you feel like an imposter for whatever reason, because you don't know the answer to something, because you're not sure of how to do something in particular, the cool thing is that there's a community of people out there who want to help. And so I think one of the best ways to overcome imposter syndrome is even though you're not perfect, well, you can be pretty daggone good about finding the answer to just about anything. And that can kind of help you overcome that imposter syndrome. But also just get used to it, because unfortunately, I don't think that it ever necessarily goes away 100%. Now, let's talk about the next principle, which is actually probably one of my absolute favorites. And that is the Pareto Principle. And if you've never heard of the Pareto Principle, you've probably heard of the 80-20 rule, which is what this is also called. And if you want an incredible book on the Pareto Principle, I would highly suggest that you read 80-20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. Even if you are not into sales and marketing, it's an absolutely excellent book about how powerful the Pareto Principle is. And what the principle states is that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes, or 80% of the output comes from 20% of the input. And this whole kind of idea was put together by a guy by the name of Joseph Juran, and named it after an Italian economist. But mathematically, the rule is kind of a power law distribution, and it works just about everywhere. So let's talk about a couple examples. I bet that for most businesses, inventory-based businesses, 80% of their profits probably come from 20% of their SKUs. And 80% of profit is probably driven by 20% of the decisions made in a boardroom. 80% of your profits is probably derived from 20% of the efforts that you put in, no matter what. And you can take that even further, and you can do the 80-20 of the 80-20, which I want to say is the 96-4 rule, and you can go down and down and down. But one of the things that I think is really powerful about the 80-20 principle is that you could, for example, take all of your inventory and you could figure out which items, what 20% are making up 80% of your income or sales on Amazon. And then the cool thing that you can do with that is you can extrapolate the data from those 20% of SKUs, and you can figure out what they have in common. And then you get to turn that into, okay, well, if these all have this in common. So for example, if you've got, let's say you have 100 ASINs, and you say, well, these 20 are my best ASINs. These are the ones that are driving 80% of sales. And they all have a couple things in common. Maybe their sales rank is between 30 and 50,000 on Amazon. And maybe their price corridor, is what I like to call it, is within 10 or 15% over the past 90 days. Well, the first thing that I would do is I would then go out and I would find those other items that are ranked between 30 and 50,000 and have a price corridor of plus or minus 10%. And chances are I should be able to add to those 20% of ASINs that are actually doing really, really well. I don't do this enough, but something that I really wish that I would do on a more regular basis is an audit of SKUs, an audit of how I spend my time, an audit of what streams of income actually are creating 80% of my income and cutting out the other stuff. I think that I would probably see growth happen a lot faster, but I know that I don't do it as much as I should. Have you ever done this in your business?
No, not officially. This is one of those, I know what it is. Mm-hmm. I know it occurs an incredible amount of time. I mean, try to find something that doesn't have the Pareto principle in effect. I feel like when I'm getting real scatterbrained, I think I'm operating more in a Fibonacci sequence, just kind of spinning around. But the Pareto principle is everywhere. Like you said, I mean, you can take anything. Take suppliers, 20% of your suppliers. I know for a fact. I just looked at my supplier profitability on Inventory Labs, and there was only a handful right at the top. And if I didn't actually run the numbers, but it sure looked like about 20% of them was 80% of my profits. You know, I have one store that the top one on the list was almost 40% right there. So you know it's going to shake out pretty darn close and basically qualify under that 80-20 rule. No, I don't, because I try not to audit myself, because that's, you know,
it's uncomfortable.
yeah, I mean, you're freewheeling it and you know, kind of winging it, but there's a lot of, you know, this is the 80-20 rule. It comes out. It's even amazing how many different topics and genres of books that you can read that bring this up. You know, obviously the productivity stuff. You know, if you could analyze, you know, because if you think about it, if 80% of your income is coming from 20% of your activities, if you took a serious, honest look at what you do and analyzed it and took that 20% and cut out most of the 80%, I mean, how much more money could you make? You know, and then you'll create a new dynamic, but that new dynamic can also be analyzed and cut down and you know, rearrange to make yourself even more efficient. You know, so there's just multiple layers to this on how it can improve your income, your productivity, you know, all the positives that you're looking for in this business.
You know, while we're talking about this, it's actually, here's a business idea, and I know that I will not run with this. I mean, Chris, unless you end up wanting to run with it, but here's a business idea for somebody out there who knows Amazon pretty well. And of course, this would probably need to come with some sort of contract so that, you know, people could trust you and things like that. But I would pay a service that would look through my ASINs or my inventory lab reports or whatever, and give me a breakdown of what my top 20% SKUs have in common. What are their average sales ranks? What are their average selling prices? What are the average number of sellers and so on, so that I could really narrow it down and say, okay, this is what I need to focus on. I'm going to carve out a little niche in these kinds of products, and I'm going to really hammer home on them. It'd be a little bit more difficult to, you know, audit someone's time, but you could audit someone's book of business essentially on Amazon, and probably give them some really great feedback on what kind of things to focus on that have done well for them. So if anybody takes that and runs with it, let me know and I'll be your first client.
Be an excellent coaching technique, you know,
yeah,
just kind of make them analyze their not only inventory but their activities throughout their day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now let's talk about the last one, and probably the one that we could go on for the most. I know that I've got some strong feelings on this one, and this one is the sunk cost fallacy, which I think is actually, for Amazon sellers, I think is a massive stumbling block, especially for newer sellers. But I have had conversations with sellers who have been in the game for 2, 3, 4 years, and this is still a stumbling block. And if you're not familiar with the sunk cost fallacy, it's the phenomenon whereby a person is reluctant to abandon a particular strategy or a course of action because you've heavily invested in it, even when it's overly clear that if you were to let go of this strategy, this course of action, or this ASIN, that it would actually be much better for you, much better for your business. So, Chris, what I want to know from you, when have you succumbed to the sunk cost fallacy in your business, and how did you overcome it?
Well, there was that blonde back in 2007. Oh, you said in my business. I'm sorry. But she was horrible for me, but I had so much invested in it. But no, I'm sorry, business related. You know, most commonly, I fight this with items that I found that have tanked in their pricing, especially products that I find through my own research. You know, there tends to be a little, I don't know, sentimentality, you know, to those. You kind of I take a little bit more ownership of them, And so I'm a little bit more reluctant to drop the price and just get out of what turned out to be a bad buy. I'm a little reluctant to admit that it's turned into a bad buy because I was so proud of it and so excited when I found it. You know, you kind of licking your chops, rubbing your hands together. So it can be hard to accept that, you know, it just happened to pop up on a lead list a couple days after you found it through your own hard work. But you know, you can't get attached to it. You can't, you know, you're not married to these products, and you know, you have to remember that if you can just get those sourcing dollars back, you can put it into a product that's not going to tank, you know, that's not going to be it's going to have a little more staying power for you. It happens to me all the time. It's something I fight constantly. You know, especially early on, you know, when you only have so many SKUs, and you know, you could probably rattle off the vast majority of what's in stock at any given time, you know, because you're you're just all about it. You're checking your inventory and, you know, checking your pricing, and you know, just kind of helicopter you know, being a helicopter parent over your own SKUs. So but yeah, you really have to, you got to know when it's the smart decision. You know, it may hurt a little bit, but you know, don't forget what the main goal is. You know, is to turn a profit and turn that inventory over, get your sourcing dollars back, get whatever profit you can, and you know, turn it over into something else, and just keep moving.
Yeah,
it's tough.
And this is something that I think is one of the toughest things for folks. I've had conversations with people who've had inventory for 18 months or more, you know, where the price is tanked, and if they sell it, it's going to be, you know, at a loss. And then my conversation goes to, well, you know, listen, you've had this product for 18 months. How much have you paid in storage fees for this particular product? And even if you sold it at what you thought you were going to sell it at, or the price you're holding at, would you actually make money? And in a lot of cases, the answer to that question is actually no. You know, based on how much I've paid in storage fees, how much I've paid to Amazon, I'm actually not going to break even on this if I sell it for the full price that I wanted. And once that realization kicks in, it's like, oh, well, I better just get rid of this so that I stop going even further into the hole. And so here's a couple of ways that I think that you can overcome being a slave to the sunk cost fallacy, because it really is. It's just bad for business. It's bad for the bottom line. It's bad for cash flow. So you've got to limit emotional ties to ideas, products, or processes. We can leave emotional ties for religion and politics, right? You know, but no, we've got to, you know, if an idea doesn't work, if a process isn't working, if a SKU isn't working, you just got to realize that it's not you, okay? It's that product, and you just got to let it go. The other thing that I like to think about or tell people is you need to live by a malleable set of rules. Now, not a set of rules that you just bend and break whenever you feel like it, but there can be reasons for bending and breaking them. So I'll give an example of one of mine. One of mine is that I have a repricing strategy where I match the buy box, and I have a minimum ROI of 15% on my products for day number 1 through 60. And unless there is some reason that I shouldn't do that. So let's say, for example, that I buy a $1 product and I can make 10 cents on it, but I know I could sell 1,000 a month. Okay. I might bend my rules for that, especially if there's like no prep, and you know, there are a lot of other things that would need to be taken into account for me to take a 10% ROI on a $1 item. But it's possible that I would do it if the rules, you know, are there. Now, at day number 60 on my inventory, I go from a 15% ROI to a 0% ROI. So I'll take anything that I can get, even down to a break even. And then at day number 90, my inventory goes into a liquidation strategy. And what will happen is I will take a 20% loss on the product just to get my capital back and try to get it to sell as fast as possible. And at day number 90, I also start undercutting the buy box, and tanking the price as hard as it has to go to get a sale and get that inventory cleared out of there. Now, that rule is also malleable. If for some reason I know that there's a product that's only going to sell once every 3 or 4 months, but I make $150 on a $30 buy cost, well, I'm gonna bend that rule a little bit. And so I think having a malleable set of rules that you stick to and adhere to is important. Another one is remembering the big picture. Make sure that you're slashing things that are not getting you closer to the goal. If they're not pushing you forward, they're a anchor holding you back. And then I think one of the biggest things, and this goes back a little bit to the imposter syndrome, is you've got to realize that mistakes are going to happen. And as long as you learn from them, then a mistake is not a failure. It's just a mistake. It's actually an opportunity to get stronger, get better, faster, more agile in the future than it is anything else. And it might hurt a little bit. It does suck to take an L, but as long as we actually, move forward from that with a little bit of more knowledge in our tool belt, we should actually, come out ahead in the long run.
Yeah, and also remember the Pareto Principle. It's simply if that ASIN that you're falling in love with isn't part of the 20% of your ASINs that are producing 80% of your income, ASINs have to fall into that bottom 80%. And it could be for any reason. It could be just bad luck, bad timing, or whatnot. But just know that there's only a portion of your inventory. Let the Pareto Principle help you get over the sunk cost fallacy. And just kind of knowing that the numbers are going to shake out, and that ratio is going to be there for whatever reason. And just like you said, that you got to remove the emotional part of it out of it.
Absolutely. Anything we missed on this episode? This one's a bit heady, but these are some things I enjoyed talking about.
It's funny as I was doing the research for this. This is all stuff. These are just official titles to a lot of the stuff. In fact, I do all of this, just kind of analyzing and myself as an Amazon seller and analyzing my operations and whatnot. I might not have, I might not know the title of it at the specific time, but as we went into and I dove into each one of these, it didn't take too much effort to figure out exactly how that rule or that effect applies to my business and my operation. It's really interesting. I hope everybody listening found it interesting as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. And hopefully you won't have to, take a business class to understand these things. These things are, I know that the names sound a little funky and things, but these are probably things most people have thought about or heard of in some other way. So I think that we should wrap up the episode there. I do think we've got a couple of things out of this episode that we're probably going to need to follow up with. For example, I think we need to do a whole episode on virtual assistants and how to hire them, how to train them, how to manage them. Because like I said, I've got some big thoughts there. So that one will be coming up here pretty soon. Yes.
If I may, I do have a good quote of the week pertaining
wonderful.
to law school. And it's specifically, it's probably more towards imposter syndrome than anything else. And imposter syndrome being that self-doubt and essentially fear. I found this great quote and it goes, if you can't beat fear, just do it scared.
Oh, I like that. Do you remember who that was from?
Now that one is Glennon Doyle Melton.
Okay.
But I actually read not the first part. I know there was a different intro, but I read Just Do It Scared, and I ended up highlighting it in the Kindle book that I was reading. It was in a blogging book as well. So I kind of did some research, and then I traced it back to Glennon Doyle Melton. But I thought that was great. It goes right along with, done is better than perfect, like we talked about. And that imposter syndrome, being scared that you're going to be found out to be a fraud, or, whatever, made up things are going through your head that may keep you from moving forward and being successful. So yeah, just do it scared. I love it.
I really, really like that one. Yeah, that's a great one to end the week off with. Just do it scared. Kind of goes along with one of my favorite sayings. Well, embrace the suck, they kind of go hand in hand. But that's it for this week, guys. We'll be back next week with another fresh episode for you guys. Until then, have a great week. Good selling. And Chris, thanks for being here again this week, man. I will see you next week.
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share it to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.